ask a question, and Avian recently did a study, and a journalist recently wrote an article on it, comparing like Amazon, Microsoft, and a few other companies, talking about how many people they have in open source, working directly in open source and kind of focused on open source. And that number ended up being somewhere between 1 and 5% of their overall development workforce.
Mhm.
So and so the question is one of developers. So you've got roughly 30 folks focused on the upstream work.
Mhm.
Can you venture what percentage that is to the overall developer team?
Yeah, maybe it's 3 or 4%. Am I doing my math right? Uh, Maybe as much as, well, if we start including the people inside who are also engaged in upstream collaboration, it's probably more like 5%. Because
Okay.
to be clear, it's not just my team. We have been
No, no,
successful.
no, no. Understand. And
So yeah.
when and I mean, it's a common model in Linux, and I think
Mhm.
I've been finding it to be true across many other projects, where
Mhm.
you've got folks that are dedicated to doing the proprietary code, period, and then
Mhm.
you've got the folks like your team who are working just in the upstream, and then
Yeah.
you've got folks in the middle that are kind of working mostly on the proprietary stuff, but as you say, they work pushing stuff upstream with help from the grease or from those that are actively upstream in the community. So it's like these three buckets, and the one in the middle kind of pivots, right, whichever way they
Yeah.
need to go to be most effective for the overall goal of the company.
Yeah.
So when I look at that smallest bucket, the one dedicated to the upstream, it's like I said, it's been somewhere in that 2 to 5% range. And so I was just curious if those numbers hold in your organization or if you've got a different ratio, because yours is I mean, I've not looked at a quant company before. You're obviously very software focused,
Mm.
right? I mean, you've got the data analysts and you got the guys writing the algorithms, and I figure that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
The two fundamental work groups.
Yeah. And at G Research, that so there is this cadre of quants who are writing the algorithms and being very clever, but there's 4 or 5 times that amount of people who are providing the infrastructure and the machinery in which to place those very clever algorithms and do things. So it's quite a large organization, quite a large engineering organization, I should say, at the end of the day, to support those very clever mathematician quanti brains. And it's interesting to hear that your percentage is about somewhere between 2 to 5%. That reassures me that I might be doing it right. So that's cool.
You mentioned developers and engineers, but we also talked about at the beginning-ish of the episode that there's much more than just development. Do you have people,
Yes.
doing marketing stuff, technical writing, and did you factor them in as well into that percentage?
Thank you for bringing that back around. I meant to mention it up front, but yes, when we built the team out, one of the first roles that I had for was director of community and developer relations. And that is still the hardest bit of the work, to be honest. And in fairness, we probably have too small of a team over there. And uh, but yes, we have Katerina, who runs that whole department. She has a group of people who support that function, um, both from doing actual sort of developer relations internally and externally, and then a number of tech writers and a number of people who help us build little GitHub websites for our projects and support community. Like, there are all sorts of little tiny pieces of development that need to happen as part of that developer relations process. It's a team that works very, very closely with marketing, with our talent team inside G Research, but also the engineering teams inside G Research. Like, they have to be plugged into what's happening on the ground. If we want to write about things, for example, we need to know what's going on. And then there's a huge world of have open source that we need to connect to and build relationships with. And that's where a lot of that team, where the role really comes into focus and really shines, because it's all the stuff that you forget to do as an engineer when you're just focused on getting your task done. It's sending emails back to people, setting up meetings, having conversations, going to conferences, and just meeting people and making those connections. And it sometimes it can feel trivial, as I say, like just meeting a person, like what's that going to do? But I can't tell you the number of times that those things have turned into wonderful engineering projects that have brought the company value. So it's weird and silly, but it somehow transpires that all this social activity that we engage in actually does equate to meaningful engineering productivity at the end of the day.
So back to how do you sell that as a cost center?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it remains one of the smaller teams on my team, is because I'm wary of making that sort of too big and a target for what are you all doing here, because it is harder to equate the money that generates, just because it's more on the ethereal end of that spectrum that I was talking about. It's talent acquisition and raising the profile of G Research so that people have heard of us at all. And we know that is improving our ability to hire, but how much is that worth? Maybe what I was just saying about conversations that we have in the wild end up really impacting the company. Well, maybe that's true, but how much of that eventual work do you attribute to the initial conversation, right? Is it
harder?
1%? Is it 50%? Like 100%? It wouldn't have happened had we not been in that room, but we were, and so it happened. But the engineer actually did the work and put it together. So isn't it that person's work that did it? And so you're right. I worry about that chunk of the team and how to express the positive effects there. One of the things that we've been working on recently is trying to create or formulate larger initiatives around our outreach. For a while, the initiatives, the work that we were doing felt very dispersed and not targeted, not something that you could communicate to the board of directors, for example, as this is what we're doing. Because there are lots of little details in dealing with community that you just can't come with a litany of little tiny commits to the board of directors. So one of the things, for example, that we're doing is there's a whole bunch of academic connections that we want to make as part of G researchers' interest in moving their own research forward. And this is a subject that is key to the board of directors' vision for the company. And so we can see that, and that's the kind of work that is social. We have to be out there connecting with academic institutions and professors and grad students and their work, and so trying to connect that kind of work, even though there's lots of little details in that work, summing it up as like this is the academic connections proposal initiative thing. It sounds silly, but because we know that there's focus and therefore dollars behind that idea at a board level, just trying to make sure that we're connecting that work that we do already with the work that they're interested in doing, and making it clear that we're working towards their aims.